Hi everybody, it's Emily and I'm back in the kitchen today talking about provisioning, preserving, and preparing food for long-term life on a boat. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important things we do in our preparations, but also kind of a controversial thing too. We're going to talk about canning meat in a pressure cooker.
Emily and Clark's Adventure.
Now, quick disclaimer, the National Center for Home Food Preservation says that it's unsafe to can in a pressure cooker, that you must use a pressure canner. And everyone on the internet will also tell you that it's unsafe and that you shouldn't do it. Well, I can tell you that we've been doing this for many years, and we've canned meat and we've eaten meat that has been canned for 4 or 5 years. It still tastes perfectly fine, and to us, it's perfectly safe and it's a valid way for us to preserve food. You should do your own research and decide what's right for you, but in this video, I'm going to tell you some of the tips and tricks that I use to can meat in my own kitchen in small batches using this pressure cooker. I'm going to tell you how I determine how much and what kinds of meats to provision for a multi-year trip on a sailboat. I'm also going to tell you how I prepare the meat once it's canned and it's on the boat and what kind of recipes that I use it in. Let's start with provisioning. Why do we bring meat? What kinds of meat do we bring? And how much? Well, the reasons that we bring anything when we provision for food on the boat is number one, to have foods that we like that might not be available in other places. A second reason we provision is to have foods that are going to last a long time and be convenient for us. So there's the second reason. The third reason is that we might be able to get them at a lower cost now versus when we're out there sailing. Meat certainly meets all three of these criteria. We like to eat meat. We do high fat, high protein, low carb when we can, and meat is an important part of that kind of diet. Meat does cost more in other countries when it is available. It's often things like Spam and Vienna sausage and canned tuna, things that we don't really like to eat. So this gives us more availability of foods that we like. It's also really inexpensive here in the United States. I got 12 pounds of beef for $2.99 a pound, which is a great price, and we're going to can that up today. And also, canning meat minimizes the amount of space that we have to have in our freezer, and it protects us in case the freezer has a failure when we're out there. This is all shelf-stable food. I mean, why does anybody can anything? Anywhere around the world, you can buy some canned food, open it up, and eat it, and you know it's safe. That's what canned meat does for us on the boat. So that's why we can meat. What kinds of meat do we can? Well, chicken, pork, and beef are kind of the things that we like to eat in our diet. Chicken is very, very available in the United States, and it's pretty inexpensive. A can of chicken is going to cost maybe $2. And honestly, canned chicken is canned chicken, and chicken is available a lot of places. So I don't want to use valuable space in my boat to carry a lot of chicken, and I don't want to take the time to can chicken when it's pretty good quality and it's pretty darn cheap already. So we just buy our canned chicken. We do a lot of beef because beef is inexpensive in the States and we can get a good quality of beef with some nice marbling in it. We'll do a lot of beef. I'd say 70% of what I can in terms of meat is going to be beef. And the other 30% is probably going to be pork. And we do that in a couple different ways, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. In terms of how we carry it and how much we carry, I always can meat in pint jars. These are wide mouth pint jars. All my jars are wide mouth, mostly because I really like that I can clean them out. I can get my whole hand in here. And it's also about the right portion for 2 people to eat 1 meal out of. So mostly pint jars. I got quarts too, but I like the wide mouth. Also, as a minimalist, it's nice to not have to stock 2 different sizes of lids, 2 different sizes of rings. Everything matches everything else, and it just simplifies life. So pint jars for canning meat for us. If you have a large family, you might want to use quarts. That might be more of a size for you, but I also recommend the wide mouth just because it's easier to get your hands in there to pack them and also to wash them. In terms of how much meat we provision, well, we like to eat meat a lot. We eat this meat about once a week. When we have access to fresh groceries, we try to mix it in. We try to do pasta maybe once a week. We try to do more of a rice and beans combination once a week. But we're definitely eating this at least a few times a month. So that's like 50 jars a year. I think last season we had 48, maybe it was even 60 jars, and that lasted just 2 seasons. So I'm going to pack at least 50 jars for this 3 to 5 year trip. I might even pack 100. It just boils down to what fits on my boat. Speaking of space, another reason why I use these pint jars is because most of our cupboards on the boat are this high, and you can get 2 pints in there. If I were to pack quarts, I've got a bunch of empty space on the top. So just another reason I use pints instead of quarts. If you're interested in more about how I decide how much of each food to bring, I will do probably another video about that. I will put a spreadsheet on Patreon that shows how I calculate what things to bring and how to pack them, those sorts of things. So stay tuned for that. But suffice to say, we bring meat, we bring a lot of meat, and that's the jars that we bring it in. So let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of how I can this in a pressure cooker. Obviously I'm canning in smaller jars. Obviously I'm canning in smaller batches. I can get about 5-pint jars, 4-quart jars, or 10 half-pint jars in my pressure cooker. So it's going to take a little bit longer. You might want to keep that in mind if you're thinking about doing this. It's going to take you several batches to get it done. Generally when I'm canning meat, I'm just canning meat. I'm not canning it with sauces or vegetables or spices or broths. And that's for a few reasons. Number one, I don't like to put water in my cans because canning water just seems like a waste of space to me. Number two, it gives me versatility. If I have just plain old beef, I can season it any way I want. This can be an Asian meal, a Mexican meal, a French meal. It can be anything if it's just meat before I start adding spices to it. And that's really the key to having a well-stocked boat kitchen, is having lots of spices and oils and things that you can combine to add excitement to your food, but just canning staples. That way, at the end of a season, you're not left with something that's maybe Indian, something that's French, something that's a little bit more bizarre, and it makes it harder to put meals together. So this gives me versatility. The third reason that I like to can just beef is when it's 3, 4, 5 years later and I open that can of beef or pork or whatever the meat is and I smell it. If it smells like good meat, I know it's good. If I were to put lots of spices and onions and sauces in there and open it up and smell it, it might be a little bit harder to tell if something's off. So that's why I can just meat in the jar. When I'm processing in a pressure cooker, I'm going to use the same times that are recommended by the National Center for Home Food Preservation, but I'm going to be cooking, in this case, at 15 psi. Their directions usually call for 10 or 11 psi in a pressure canner. So I really know I'm going to cook the life out of this meat. Now, if it were vegetables, that might turn them into mush, but in this case, with meat, it just makes for an extra super tender pot roast, and I'm totally okay with that. Lastly, I really like this pressure cooker. We go way back. We have a history. I've used this pressure cooker to process and can food before, and I feel pretty comfortable with it. It's never really let me down. If I were to go buy a brand new pressure cooker off the shelf, or if I had an Instapot or something like that, there's no way I would be canning 50 or 100 cans of food to go on a 5-year trip. I just wouldn't rely on it. So that's really important to me too, is using a pressure canner that I trust and I know and I love. Now that I've given you a little bit of background information, let me show you how I can meat in my pressure cooker. So I've got my wide mouth lids, my wide mouth rings, my wide mouth jars, and I've got my jar grabber as well. All these things are clean, they haven't been sterilized, but they're clean. That's all we need because we're gonna cook the life out of them. Over here we've got our cutting board. I've got my meats. I'm gonna do, these are each about 3.5 or 4 pounds each. So I've got those, I've got a knife so I can chop it up. I've got scissors to open a package, and then I've got 2 just trays here. One will be for meat, one will be for fat. I'm using the raw pack method, so it's pretty much just gonna be chunks of meat in a jar with salt. I'm not gonna trim too much fat off. I did that a couple years ago and it made the meat a little bit drier, and we didn't like that. So all the fat's gonna go in, saving in really, really big chunks. So that's about it. Let's start canning. I just washed my hands, they're nice and clean. And I'm gonna take off my watch and my wedding ring because it's made of string and it gets dirty very easily. So those are gonna go up there. I'm just going to cut this up into about 1-inch cubes. When this is cooked, it's not going to cut, it'll kind of come out as cubes, but it'll be pretty tender like a pot roast. As you can see, the only fat I've really cut off is like solid fat. The rest of it I'm going to leave on. Even little bits is okay. It's just going to add some nice flavor. Alright, now we are ready to pack our jars. going up to the rim of the jar. I'm going to leave that headspace. And this will cook down quite a bit. Even though I'm leaving this gap at the top, it'll probably cook down another inch or so. Now that was 4 pounds of meat, and that gave us 4 jars. So that's pretty good. I'm just taking about a half teaspoon of salt. And that's it. How easy could that possibly be? That easy. I'll take a little bit of vinegar. Wipe the rim so we get a nice seal. Don't want grease in there, so it's not going to seal properly. I'm going to turn it around and just dry it. Alright, now we're going to take our lids. These are going to become 2019 lids. These don't have to be super tight, just kind of finger tight, so I have to hold them down. And they're ready to go in the canner. I'll finish the other ones up. One of the best things you can do with this after it's canned is open up the jar, put it on the stove, heat it up, and 5 minutes later, you've got really, really great pot roast. This is especially nice if we've been sailing all day or working on a project all day and I just don't have energy to cook. I can open this jar, plop in a pot, maybe throw in some instant mashed potatoes, and you're done. That's dinner in 5 minutes, and it's so good. You can also do a lot of Asian cooking with this. Some sesame oil, some ginger, some garlic. You could cook up some ramen, or you could fry up some rice to go with this. If you've got lettuce available, you can turn it into lettuce wraps. And I add a lot of dehydrated vegetables. We almost always have dehydrated broccoli, mushrooms, and carrots. So those cook up really nicely, whether it's a soup or lettuce wraps or whatever it may be, and make that an Asian dish. You could also go Mexican with this. If you had flour, you can make some homemade tortillas, can of tomatoes, can of corn, you can roast that up, make some burritos, taco salad, if you've got lettuce, that's all good. You could do like a red wine and mushroom sauce, again with the dehydrated mushrooms we have, that's a popular choice. But my absolute favorite thing to do with this is to open a jar, put it in a pot, simmer some water and rehydrate some of our mushrooms, and put in some heavy cream, a little bit of salt, and make a nice stroganoff. You can also just do it with a can of cream and mushroom soup, or if you've got mushrooms and a can of crema table cream, that's also very quick. And again, that's great on potatoes, instant mashed potatoes, noodles, any of those things. You know, I was a vegetarian when I met Clark, mostly for sustainability reasons, because I know it takes a lot more energy to create a pound of beef or greater number of calories of beef versus the same number of calories of soybeans. But then we moved on to a boat. We make our own water from the ocean. We run everything off solar panels and a wind generator. We don't have air conditioning or a car to put gas in. All these things just get erased when we move on to the boat. And I think that's an okay trade-off for living this sustainable off-grid life. I think a cow can die once in a while so that I can eat and get some dense calories. Also, for storage space, tofu is so few calories for the amount of space it takes up. This, I mean, you can easily get your 2,000 calories a day and get your protein from beef. And it tastes good. I'm sure all the vegetarians have left by now. Alright, again, just the biggest pieces of fat come off, all the rest stays on. And this is probably 4 more jars here. All this meat cost me, I think $30 today, $32. And this was 3.5 pounds, 3.5 jars, so it's pretty much a pint is pound. World around for water as well as beef. Having these mason jars definitely saves us plastic, and you can use these for so many things. They are a durable, long-lasting good. I use a stick blender in them. I use them as lanterns. We have these solar lights that go in them. I use them to vacuum seal stuff, which I'll show you in another video. I can store leftovers in them too. There are screw-on plastic lids you can get. There's just so many uses you can use mason jars for. Alright, let's put it in a pot. Fill about halfway up with water. Too much and they'll float. Alright, lock that on. I've got it set. When it comes to pressure, this little yellow dot will pop up and you'll kind of spit like. We're going to wait until steam is coming out of here. We don't want air. We want all the air out. We only want steam in here. And this little yellow dot is going to pop up. That tells us we're at pressure along with that sound and that little bit of steam coming out. And then I will reduce the heat down so it just makes a very little bit of that hissing. And then we'll set the timer for 75 minutes. If you had a pressure canner, you'd either have a weight on the top that would do that jiggling thing, or you'd have a gauge with a needle on it that would show you when it was hot enough. I don't have either of those things. I've just got this pressure cooker. So again, we're going to do 75 minutes. Center for Home Food Preservation says 11 psi. This is 15 psi. So we're definitely going to be safe if we do that 75 minutes. In my opinion, do your own research. Oh wow, sharp knife. Ooh, that's so much nicer. I love you. And sharp things.
Daddy.
Oh man, it's so much easier.
I like these sharpeners. They're not the best, but oh man, they're so good.
This comes out to about $3 a jar. That feeds 2 of us for our biggest meal of the day. It's not bad considering The groceries are about $300 a month, like $10 a day. Kind of our budget. Sometimes much less. I've only got room for 5 jars, so I've got 2 batches and an extra. So this is gonna go in the fridge, and then when I get some more pork or some more beef, I will do another batch. And hey, listen to that, we're almost ready. Okay, so it's plenty hot. Turn that way down. Just want to make sure that that yellow button stays up, and we've got a little bit of gas spitting out. There we go. 75 minutes, we turn off the heat, and then we're done. Then we just take the jars out, put them aside to cool, leave them sit for 24 hours, and we start our next batch. Alright, so a little bit of steam coming off there. We're going to turn the burner off and let that sit. When that little button comes down, you can open up the pot. Alright, a little yellow indicator is down, so our pressure's all gone. I'm going to turn the knob to the letting the steam out. And it looks pretty good, so I'm going to open this. This little switch goes back. I'm going to open it away from me, of course, so the steam doesn't get in my face. And there we go. They're still bubbling up. It's still bubbling. Oh, one of them already popped. See that? Alright, turn the heat back on, lock our lid, we line it up, done, switch back to pressure cooking. Bring that up to temperature, and then it'll be another 75 minutes for this batch. This batch is still boiling pretty good. Oh, see that? It's done. They don't seal, which happens sometimes, then we eat one for dinner tomorrow night. Another one. Beef for beef, 19. Round 2. This would be a lot easier if I could put like 20 cans in and just process them all at once, but we don't have a pressure canner and we're rich with time, so we'll do it this way. Hope you guys learned a lot, and